What in general is your philosophy of design and building and architecture?
Well, some of the most recent projects I worked on prior to government service were the old post office building and almost simultaneously Trump Doral in Miami. So these were both two just massive undertakings, both redevelopments, which in a lot of cases, having worked on ground up construction, redevelopment projects are in a lot of ways much more complicated because you have existing attributes, but also a lot of limitations you have to work within, especially when you're repurposing a use. So this, the old post office building on Pennsylvania Avenue
So beautiful.
It's unbelievable. So this was a Romanesque revival building built in the 1890s on America's Main Street to symbolize American grandeur. And at the time, there were post office being built in this style across the country, but this being really the defining one. Still to this day, the tallest habitable structure in Washington, the tallest structure being the monument, the nation's only vertical park, which is that clock tower. But you've got these thick granite walls, those carved granite turrets. Just an unbelievable building. You've got this massive atrium that runs through the whole center of it that is topped with glass. So having the opportunity to spearhead a project like that was so exciting. And actually, it was my first renovation project. So I came to it with a tremendous amount of energy, vigor, and humility about how to do it properly, ensuring I had all the right people. We had countless federal and local government agencies that would oversee every single decision we made. But in advance of even having the opportunity to do it, there was a close to 2-year request for proposal, like a process that was put out by the General Services Administration. So it was this really arduous government procurement process that we were competing against so many different people for the opportunity, which a lot of people said it was a gigantic waste of time. But I looked at that, and I think so did a lot of the other bidders, and say it's worth trying to put the best vision forward.
So you fell in love with this project.
I fell in love, yeah.
So is there some interesting details about what it takes to do renovation? Is there about some of the challenges or opportunities? Because you want to maintain the beauty of the old,
Yeah,
and now like upgrade the functionality, I guess, and maybe modernize some aspects of it without destroying what made the building magical in the first place.
So I think the greatest asset was already there. The exterior of the building, which we meticulously restored, and any addition to it had to be done sort of very gently in terms of any signage additions. And the interior spaces were completely dilapidated. It had been in a post office, then was used for a really rundown food court and government office spaces. It was actually losing $6 million a year when we got the concession to build it, and when we won and became one of, I think, a great example of public-private partnerships working together. But I think the biggest challenge in having such a radical use conversion is just how you lay it out. So the amount of time I would get on that Excella twice a week, 3 times a week, to spend day trips down in Washington, and we would walk every single inch of the building, laying out the floor plans, debating over the configuration of a room. There were almost 300 rooms, and there were almost 300 layouts. So nothing could be repeated. Whereas when you're building from scratch, you have a box and you decide where you want to add, potential elements, and you kind of can stack the floor plan all the way up. But when you're working within a building like this, every single room was different. You see the setback. So the setback then required you to move the plumbing. So there was no, it was really a labor of love. And to do something like this, and that's why I think renovation, we had it with Doral as well. It was 700 rooms over over 650 acres of property. And so every single unit was very different and complicated. Not as complicated in some ways. The scale of it was so massive, but not as complicated as the old post office. But it required a level of precision. And I think in real estate, you have a lot of people who design on plan, and a lot of people who are in the business of sort of acquiring and flipping. So it's more financial engineering than it is building. And they don't spend the time sort of sweating these details that make something great and make something functional. And you feel it in the end result. But I mean, blood, sweat, tears, years of my life for those projects. And it was worth it. I enjoyed almost, I enjoyed almost every minute of it.
So to you, it's not about the flipping. To you, it's about the art of and the function of the thing that you're creating.
100%.
What's design on plan? I'm learning new things today.
When proposals are put forth by an architect and really just the plan is accepted without, and in the case of a renovation, like if you're not walking those rooms, the number of times a beautifully laid out room was on a blueprint, and then I'd go to Washington and I'd walk that floor and I'd realize that there was a column that ran right up through the middle of the space where, the bed was supposed to be, or the toilet was supposed to be, or the shower. So there's a lot of things that are missed when you do something conceptually without sort of rooting it in the actual structure. And that's why I think even, with ground up construction as well, people who aren't constantly on their job sites, constantly walking the projects, there's just a lot that's missed.
I mean, there's a wisdom to the idea that we talked about before, live with the materials and walking the construction site, walking the rooms. I mean, that's what you hear from people like Steve Jobs, like Elon.
Yeah.
That's why you live on the factory floor. That's why you constantly obsess about the details, the actual, not of the plans, but the physical reality of the product. I mean, the insanity of Steve Jobs and Johnny Ive working together on like making it perfect, making the iPhone, the early designs, prototypes, making that perfect, like what it actually feels like in the hand. You have to be there, like as close to the metal as possible to truly understand.
And you have to love it in order to do that.
Right. It shouldn't be about how much it's going to sell for or all that kind of stuff. You have to love the art.
Because for the most part, you can probably get 90, maybe even 95% of the end result, unless something has terribly gone awry by not caring with that level of almost like maniacal precision. But you'll notice that 10% for the rest of your life, So I think that extra effort, that passion, I think that's what separates good from great.